Thank you for coming today. This is the seminar on loving our Muslim neighbors. And my name is Cory Willson. I teach missiology or missions here at Calvin Theological Seminary. And with me I have three wonderful guests. Here we have Najla Kassab. She is the president of the World Communion of Reformed Churches. Acronym, and a lover of basketball and grieving the loss of Kobe Bryant. And next to her we have Roberta. She's a professor at Fuller Theological Seminary in cross-cultural communication, and she does a lot in terms of ethnomusicology. So you can ask her questions about that. I'll let her explain what that is. It has to do with music, and it has to do with multicultural.
And I live 12 miles away from where the helicopter went.
And next to her is Dr. Azumah, and he is the director of the Sinai Center in Ghana, the University of Ghana, and formerly at Columbia in Atlanta, Georgia, teaching world Christianity there, and has recently moved back to his home country of Ghana. He's also a visiting professor at Yale Divinity School. So today's session, we're going to be talking about loving our, speak louder, okay. Loving our religious neighbors. We'll have to speak up loud, we don't have mics today. And what we're going to do is I'm going to ask our panelists some questions, a little bit about to set the context in which they are engaging Muslims and their work and their experiences to kind of situate them, because each context is different. The relationships, the histories, the overlay of religion and ethnicities and sometimes tribal identities all get overlaid with religious identities as well. So it's very different than, say, here in North America, where most of the interactions between Christians and Muslims happens between immigrants or children of immigrants. And so that'll be really important. But as we're starting off in a conversation between the four of us, be writing down your questions or thinking of your questions. And probably midway through, I'll pause and invite you to ask a question of our panelists as well. I do ask, though, that you make your question an actual question and not so much a statement, so keep them brief and make them really a curious, kind of appreciative question. And that will make our time flow well together. So, does that sound good? And we have 2 hours together, so we'll have a nice mix of our conversation and then inviting you in and back and forth. So, I thought it'd be really good for us to begin by talking a little bit about your experience. So when did you begin interacting with Muslims, and how has that emerged over time? Kind of paint a picture of the context in which your work as a Christian engaging Muslims has began and has evolved. So educate us a little bit on that. Najla, would you mind?
Well, I'm Lebanese. I was born in Lebanon. And really, I grew with Muslim, with Islam, with Muslim friends. I went to school with Muslim friends who were sitting, we were sitting on the same bench. At that time, I didn't know who was a Muslim and who was a Christian. He was a friend, and especially because I was raised in a reform school, our church has schools where Muslims and Christians live together. We would be singing hymns together at Christmas, and things were very smooth. I didn't feel like there's something, a Muslim is a neighbor. In the Lebanese war, sometimes it takes one incident to change the whole thing. Hearing, like, for example, a Muslim killed a Christian in one area. When the Lebanese war started in 1975, there were, areas that became predominantly Muslim and areas that became predominantly Christian. And here started this building walls between who's a Christian and who's a Muslim. Even now I know from the name who is a Muslim, who is a Christian. I want to say, our neighbors are Muslims. I work between Lebanon and Syria. and the National Evangelical Synod of Syria and Lebanon, where I work, which is a Presbyterian church in Lebanon and Syria. All our ministry is combined for Christians and for Muslims. We have schools, we have hospitals, we have every outreach, they are part of that. I want to say, thank God that I knew Islam before what's happening on media today. Because I think now it's totally different because of the amount of negative stories that we hear about Islam. And I want to say that to me, as I'm never worried from a Muslim, but I'm very worried from a radical Muslim, exclusive, who thinks that he is the one or she is the one who has the true faith, and everybody else should be attacked or should be put down. And this is where we have to draw distinctions between the moderate Muslim and the radical Muslim. Because at the end, the moderate Muslim also pays the same price that we pay with these exclusive attitudes. And I want to tell you, this radical exclusive attitude, there is similarity in it in Christianity and in Judaism. And interestingly enough, they all look the same. Because they think that, for example, ISIS, they base what they're doing on the Quran. They take texts, and many Muslims think that this is not right. This is misinterpretation for using the text of the Quran. The same thing, some Christians could take the Bible and have these radical stances, or the Torah. This is where the distinction, and this is how the word has changed. Now, there is this culture of fear in the world, unfortunately. Not because of Islam, because of these exclusive attitudes that's happening. And then many times it's used politically or used worldwide in that. And that changed people's, relation to Muslims, even in the Middle East. And this is where all of us we are called to join hands to correct this image against having this Islamophobia. Because we're seeing the news. The news many times is directed, the news they want to sell. They don't care about, what happens. And we end up paying the price. So in this journey, we have to spend lots of effort to take out the negative pictures that the media is putting for us day after day, whether in the Middle East or here in that. And this distinction is very important to have. I want to say the schools that we run as a synod, as Presbyterian Church, we teach around 6,900 students. 90% are Muslims. And I want to say, now after the Lebanese war, we see our schools as the place for reconciliation, where people grow together, live together. And now with Syria, with the problems that are happening in Syria, the future of Syria, we want to say how we are going to do reconciliation when people start to get scared from each other. And these schools are the best place that the people would sit together and they meet on the level as human beings and enjoy the richness that everyone has. I just want to finish, but I want to share a story when I was delivering my baby in the American hospital of Beirut. And I had my epidural, and I closed my eye. My husband went out of the room. So I stayed there, and I'm standing there, and a woman was holding my hand. I was saying, Jesus, Jesus. And then I opened my eyes, and she's a veiled woman, crying. These are unbelievers. We live with them. Yeah, we meet on the human level. And what's happening in the world has divided the world into this very negative attitude towards Islam. Personally, I live with them. I share my values, some of my values with them, because I'm from the Middle East. I disagree on radical Islam. I disagree that Islam calls for killing. And we encourage this moderation. The students who graduate from our schools, are moderate Muslims. You know why they are moderate? Because when they are in our schools, we respect them and love them as human beings. And yes, we share the gospel with them. We share it with how we deal with them, and they know about Christ. I know the situation is different in the US. We have new changes, and this is the challenge where in this session we can probably try to learn together about, is really a Muslim threat? Thank you.
I'm Roberta King, and I lived and ministered in Nairobi, Kenya for 22 years. That meant that I listened to the call of the minaret every day. It woke me up. I went down to Kenya, I'm down to Mombasa, and where it was heavily Muslim, and you would have it more often. Plenty of people, plenty of women in their buoys, and you can only see their eyes. But it wasn't there anything to fear. And like Najla, that's the society. That's what's happening there. So I was asked by Fuller to come and join them on faculty, and I arrived in 2000. I left Nairobi in 99. And I have to tell you that sometimes the cultural stress, I was just looking forward to kind of being at home again. And then I woke up one morning on 9/11 and saw airplanes crashing into the Twin Towers. I'm going, oh my God, what's going on here? And that started a whole journey for me. And I'm part of the Brehm Center for Worship, Theology, and the Arts. And we had an opportunity to apply for a large grant from the Luce Foundation. And so I was awarded a grant through them called Uncommon Sounds, Songs of Peace and Reconciliation among Muslims and Christians. And that grant took me to Beirut, and Liban, and then also to Yogyakarta, Indonesia. What I came to find out is that while I'm going all over the world, trying to learn about Islam and music, that a block away from Fuller, every Wednesday evening, there was a Middle East music ensemble rehearsing. And so I started, if I'm going to look at songs of peace and reconciliation as an ethnomusicologist, someone who studies music and culture, and each people's cultural music is valid, no longer do you have to know Beethoven only in order to be a good musician, I better learn some Middle Eastern music. And there was my opportunity. And I was singing, all of a sudden I was singing, they handed me the drums, and very quickly I found out, oh, they have different rhythms than I have. And things like that. So I ended up singing with the women, because the men play the instruments, the women sing. And I made friends, and I have very good friends. Every Wednesday evening I was there singing and listening to them talk and interacting with them, some Muslims, some Christians, I'm in the States now, and What was fascinating to me in that group was that they always had people coming in and out of the Middle East. So there were my opportunities to be not only learning the music, but learning the culture, i.e. being with people and learning what's at their heart in order to communicate with them. And so that really is what launched me into Islam and learning more about it. I had studied as a missiologist, and I wanted to study Islamics before I left for Africa, but there's so much to learn. I said, when I come back another time, and then 9/11 happened. So that's what got me started. I'll tell you more later. You need your prof here.
Yeah, good morning.
Good morning.
I'm from Ghana. I'm coming right now from New Haven, but I lived in Georgia before that, and I thought I was going back to Ghana to live there and to work there. But I got invited back to come and help teach some of the courses here. How did I get involved with Islam and with Muslims? I grew up one. That was my family. I was raised one. I was raised a Muslim. And I became a Christian in high school. And I had some difficult moments with my parents, especially my dad. But then, after 3 rough years, we kind of reconciled as a family. My Muslim uncle, who stood by me all the way, was the one who paid for my theological education. When I went to seminary. And after seminary, I realized how much stereotyping was going on between Muslims, amongst Muslims about Christians, and amongst Christians about Muslims. And I found myself between two families. My spiritual family, which is a Christian family that I adopted, and my biological family, and my cultural family. And so it became very apparent to me that I needed to make some choices. I realized that my Christian family, my spiritual family, really loved me, and they loved the fact that I was one of them. In fact, they loved the fact that I was a convert from Islam, and they wanted to hear my testimony all the time. But the testimony they wanted to hear me telling my story, telling some of the pain that I went through. I would share the testimonies, then I go back home and I'm crying, and I'm going through that kind of pain because I've been made to relive it. And I felt over time that I was being abused. And so I got to a point I refused to share my testimony. I said, "Halas, enough. I wasn't going to do that." But then I also got, because most of the cheering, when they were cheering me, it was whenever I said something negative about Islam. Not when I said something about my Christian faith. And that became quite troubling to me. And so I decided I was going to either become a bridge builder or someone who will deepen the rift, deepen the divide. And I made a conscious choice that I was going to try to see whether I can, if not be able to build bridges, at least knock down some walls in my studies. And so I started to study Islam more. I went to do my doctorate in Islam. And then I decided that Islam was what I needed to help my Christian brothers and sisters understand better. But also, I also found that I had an opportunity to help Muslims understand Christianity also. And so that is what I'm working on now. And it's been a very, when I talk about Islam, I tell my students when I was in Georgia, when I talk about Islam, the image I have is not ISIS, it's not an immigrant, it's not a refugee, it's not an illegal person, alien. When I talk about Islam, the image I have is my sister, it's my cousin, it's my mother. So I tell my students, when you ask me, when Muslims die, will they go to heaven or hell? So you just ask me, is your mother going to go to heaven or hell? How do you want me to answer that question? So my answers are not going to be black and white. They are going to be complicated. Studying Islam deepened my theology, but it also messed my theology.
Well, there's a lot in these three, in these introductions even, to elicit maybe a lot of questions already for you to give us a little bit of teaser. And so I want to ask a little bit, Kassab, you mentioned about a culture of fear. And so I'm wondering, as a pastor, but also as your role as the president of the Willson Council of Churches, what are the challenges to, or what is necessary for discipleship formation for Christians to counter this culture of fear? There's obviously getting accurate information, but what else, or what theological concepts are helpful in this, or what is needed for a robust formation of Christians to counter this culture of fear?
Probably the easiest way is to stop hearing the news. No, but it's a matter of, dialogue is very important, and especially because sometimes we have the chance of dialogue of life. That's right. That changes us. Breaks this fear. Because the fear, who put the fear? The fear came from politics, from media, right? I mean, why are we scared? Because of stories that we have heard on media. And we have never had a neighbor who's a Muslim, so it's all this fear that's accumulating. And to deal with this fear is to dare to cross the bridge and to meet the people on the level of human beings. I know this is what is, it's inviting both of us. Henry Newman says, hospitality is when you call the stranger to come and be in the circle, where you both become in this circle and you are both changed. It's getting into this free space. What happened, many times, our reaction to fear is that we put walls and we escape. We don't want to deal with that. But to come together and in a new place where many times we are changed, we are sharing how living with people, myself even, sometimes I have many prejudices that are changed when I meet people. And I discovered, sometimes I feel how much I need to learn about Christianity to deal with Muslims. Because they are our neighbor, but I'm not a hospitable neighbor. Sometimes dealing with them teaches not only about them, it teaches us about us. How we have, did not dare to take this step and to open up and to try to hear their story and to hear their pain and to hear this. So to break the fear is to take this step, a risky step, because it's risky to open up. The easiest way is to be closed. But to open up is a risky thing. To take this step and to be changed there, Many times we see things as one way. Us going to Muslims. I think it's two ways. And we are invited to this table. And who owns the table is not us. It's God who owns the table. And He invites the people and works through people's lives to know Christ, And at the end, it's God's work in the rest of the church. We have to create these free spaces of encounter. And I believe what we're doing today is our first space of encounter. We could have signed to another session. But I think this challenge of, let's talk about it. Let's see what God wants from us as a church. Let us see how we can really live faith and share faith and not compromise faith, but live faith the way Christ wants us to live. It's not easy. It's easy to run, but to be in the same together and be shaped together. And many times we feel like we really did not understand what Jesus wanted from us. And as you said, I like what John said, don't give very easy answers. Sometimes we tend to give very easy answers. But when we live with them, we have more difficult answers. And we grow to know how to deal with them, and in this journey we are not alone. God is shaping us. Christ is teaching us how we can really be impactful. And when God is working with these people, sometimes we think it's our job. It's God's job of allowing this encounter and changing us both.
Dr. King, tell us a little bit about how you use music. So you talked about, actually, it's interesting, on hospitality. It was you receiving hospitality from your friends and Pasadena, your Muslim friends in Pasadena, that was your way into this. But tell us a little bit about how you use music, or you said uncommon sounds. Like, what is the context in which you've organized Christians and Muslims who come together? Tell us a little bit about how you use music to kind of create this environment of hospitality, and what you've learned from those as a musicologist.
I don't have the long years of experience that my brother and sister have here, but I've been involved in this for 10 to 12 years now. So I think how I use music becomes an arena that initially is non-threatening. So we can come together because of our music. Now, I've always, as an ethnomusicologist, I always have to point out that music isn't universal, but its meaning is not. And so you combine that with what I teach my students is music is attached to people. Now, how many of you are musicians here? Okay. And we each have our favorite music. Even if you're not a musician, we have our favorite music that speaks to us. So that when we move around the world, i.e., Beirut, Lebanon, Ghana, which I visited, and I studied with Professor Kwame Katia, the music of a people is very precious to them. So that when we learn to engage with the music of a people, then we are honoring them, and we are showing them what I call musical hospitality. When we're hospitable, we welcome people, and we try to please them. Don't we? We try to do something that will make them feel appreciated. So that when I was singing with Lael Azumah, and a very wealthy Muslim man comes up to me and he says, "You're singing in Arabic?" It was just, he was amazed that I would even be interested. And I sure right off, he caught it that I'm a Christian. He says, "Well, I'm Muslim, but I don't follow that." I said, "Oh, tell me more about that." And what I found was not only by learning to practice musical hospitality or to enter into another people's cultural musics, it allows me to have deep and good discussions with people who are Muslims. I sing with Nana, who is from Jordan. She's what I call a nominal Muslim. She comes to my house to watch the Super Bowl. She came 3 years ago, and in the middle of watching the Super Bowl, she kind of fell apart because she was texting to her family in Jordan. I said, "Nana, what is it?" And she starts crying. We've had lots of discussions, and I had an opportunity. I said, "Lana," and Summer was there too. She's originally she was born in Jerusalem. She's Orthodox Christian. So I said, "Lana, is it okay? I'd like to pray for you." "Oh, yes, please." I said, "I want to pray in the name of Jesus. Is that okay?" She says, Muslims adore Jesus." "Yes, Lana, let's pray, and we're going to ask Jesus to help you." And I went over and I actually laid hands on her and prayed with her. That's music, my context. Small as it is, music deals at deep levels, and it gives us opportunities to learn about one another's humanness, to overcome that Islamophobia that the media has developed. So I always see music and my ethnomusicology as a means of gaining entrance and making friends with Muslims. And we have no opportunity. And as a missionary, I want to be a witness. So I can't go up and say, "Well, you're all wrong and I'm right." So music is a non-threatening way, especially when we show interest in the music of whatever they love, including, contemporary Christian and all that stuff.
Thank you, Dr. Azumah. You mentioned you wanted your life, your work to build bridges and even tear down some walls if possible. Can you? What are some of the challenges either within the Christian community or outside that have been some of the major challenges that you faced in trying to build bridges and tear down walls? Are there things that come to mind for you, either within the Christian community or from outside?
Well, yes, I think it's been tough, and but it's also been very, very fulfilling in many respects, because there's an African proverb that I love so much, and I used it once here in America and got into trouble.
Oh, good, let's hear it.
But it goes like, in times of crisis, foolish people build walls, and wise people build bridges.
Wow.
And I for me, there's a time that we need to build bridges. It is in times of crisis. And as Roberta said earlier, music is kind of non-threatening. It's you can build bridges through music, but you can also build bridges through your scholarship. You can build bridges in whatever career, profession, passion that you have. You can build bridges with that. It's what we choose to do with what God has given to us. And so I think that for me, most of the challenges that I have faced, of course, have come from some of my Muslim friends are just perplexed because they see me and they say, you know Islam so well, and yet you are not Muslim. How come? They are just confused. And I joke with them, I said, maybe it's because I know it so well. But they are just as confused, and they wonder why I can study Islam to that level and can even teach Muslims about Islam, and I don't practice it myself. But for me, most of the challenges that I have had from the Muslim community has come from Muslims who feel like conversion from Islam is a kind of a treasonable offense, and therefore you don't even deserve to share a kind of a platform with me. And I have had that when I was studying even in Birmingham, in the University of Birmingham in the UK. Some of my Muslim colleagues got to know I was a convert, and one Malaysian Muslim colleague of mine told me that I am lucky I'm not in Malaysia because I'll be there. And that's what, and that's kind of, and I said to him, thank God I'm not from Malaysia. So I'm so thankful then because, and he said to me, and I said, if I'm your brother, he said yes. He said, especially if you're my brother. That's what he said. So even today, I have Muslim scholars, colleagues of mine, who would like to work with me, but because of that, he's a convert. There's always suspicion about converts. And for right reasons, because I tell people, if you really want to know something good about somebody, you don't go asking their ex. You go ask their ex to say something good about them, you will hardly get something good. So, converts are like X. You don't come asking me to tell you something wonderful about Islam. If it were that wonderful, I would still be there. So I have that kind of struggle with Muslims, but overall, in Ghana, I find younger Muslims so eager to engage. And that is what gives me joy. That the younger generation, we are doing a big conference in February in Ghana, and most of those working with me are young Muslim academics, and they are leading it. And when I show up, they are so excited just to see me, and they know I'm a Christian, they know I'm a convert. It doesn't bother them. From the Christian side, it's also very similar. There are many Christians that I encounter in my work. When I talk about loving Muslims, to talk about reaching out to Muslims, and they think I'm very naive. They tell me, you don't know Muslims. If you really know what Muslims can do, what they are capable of, you will not be saying those things. And I tell them, well, I'm not asking you to do Muslims a favor by asking you to love Muslims. I'm asking you to do yourself a favor by letting go hatred and fear. Because these are unhealthy emotions for yourself. If you store these kinds of emotions in you, they are going to, in the long run, damage you and our own communities. And so for me, I am just as deeply concerned about what is going on in churches, the fear and the hatred and the suspicion and all the conspiracy theories going on. Is so damaging to us as a community. And that bothers me. So when I talk to Christians about reaching out to Muslims, it's not like I want you to do Muslims a favor. I want you to do yourself a favor. I had that journey. I grew up very bitter, very angry, very hateful, very fearful of Islam. And I had to heal myself at some point. I had to let that go before I realized how much God wanted to use me for. So I find that from Christian side, they are very, very resistant because they hear, when you tell them, talk about loving Muslims, what they hear is, do the Muslims a favor. The Muslims who are killing us, the Muslims who want to destroy us. We want us to do them a favor. And my Nigerian friends in West Africa have been very challenging to talk with my Nigerian friends in West Africa. I come from Ghana. The story and the experience in Nigeria is very different from Ghana. And so I'm very mindful of that and I'm very respectful of that. But also there are also many Nigerian Christians who want me to see Islam through the Nigerian eyes. And I just can't do it because I'm not a Nigerian, you see. And so I find that kind of struggle also. So context matters. Not every Muslim is my sister. I recognize that. I accept that. But not every Muslim is ISIS either.
So, be queuing up your questions. I have one more question here to follow up on this area of hospitality. There's two things, and it's not only, it's these two situations I've discerned from churches, but also students, and not, I mean, I guess it's here, the context in which I'm interacting is North America, but these are students even from, China, Korea, Indonesia, some from Kenya or Nigeria, as well as Canadian and North American, a few Hispanic as well. But two things that I've noticed when it comes, there are challenges to hospitality are one, fear of compromise, and the other, fear of contamination. So that's my categories, but two stories. One would be a church has an annual harvest carnival for the at-risk youth in the area. And this is their one and only outreach to the community. And so they're really proud. It's it really meets a need. But then a Muslim businessman comes up to the pastor there on the night of the carnival and hands him his business card and said, "This is a really meaningful work. We from the masjid locally here, the mosque community, can we talk about maybe partnering together to help?" And one of the big fears is compromise. Will the larger city see us working together and thinking that because we're working together, I condone everything you believe? The area of, that would be the area of compromise. Contamination. A neighborhood, a church has an outdoor basketball hoop, and it's the only basketball hoop in the whole neighborhood or whole area. And the little Muslim boys and girls like to come and play there. And some of the church members are afraid because what if the mixing of playing together, Muslim and Christian, what if they become contaminated in terms of their morals? Or what if my little son falls in love with their little daughter?
Amen.
Right? I heard an amen, yeah. So those are two real challenges that I find that are, how do we address the fear of contamination and compromise, and particularly around this area of hospitality? Any one of the three of you would like to speak to that?
You know, I just want to share a small story because it has taught me a lot about hospitality. The story talks about a husband and wife. They were supposed to celebrate their wedding anniversary. They arranged to meet in a restaurant, and the husband was late from work, so the wife was very angry. They go to this restaurant. They enter, they're both troubled. The waiter comes, and she notices that they are not happy. And she knows that they have reserved this as their wedding anniversary night. So she provides to them a drink. And the woman tells her, we didn't ask for drinks. Why did you get them? She told her, I noticed that you're not happy. You know, I wanted to provide this. And a person who was telling the story, teaching the class about her hotelier, he said, this girl was hospitable, this waiter was hospitable. And there is a difference between service and hospitality. In service, you learn to present the plate from one side, left from the other side. You learn, all these lessons. But in hospitality, you think, how do people feel? And this story challenged my understanding. Do we as a church live service or hospitality? I think sometimes, many times, we are concerned with service. We do what our reformed identity taught us, we do it the proper way. We are afraid to compromise service. It's us. In service, we are thinking about us, and I understand these struggles, we have them. And in service, we are thinking, we don't want to change things in how we are raised. But in hospitality, we're not thinking about us, we're thinking about them. And that changes ministries. I'm afraid sometimes, and this is a criticism to my ministry, I remember when we wanted to start a school for refugee children. A full church was against us, one of our churches, because we wanted to start that school. And this is a group of Muslim children getting into the village, that's a nice village. They said, you're bringing us problems, we don't want these children, here. And they were against. Why? Because they were thinking of service. They were thinking of the Presbyterian church. But when we think of hospitality, it's a totally different perception. I think he or she are suffering. These children have no place to play. These children, if they stay on the streets, they could be attacked and, molested. And I'm afraid sometimes we do lots of things, but we do service, not hospitality. Sometimes we do events, we bring people, Muslims, they come to us, and they don't feel we are hospitable. Because we are worried about us, they will change us. And I'm still struggling how to do that. And I believe this hospitality changes people to know Christ. It shapes them, it loves them unconditionally. And we meet with them in the pain that they have, and together we learn how to be the church for today. Sometimes, we're concerned that we don't want to bother to change things, compromise, contamination. It's us. But the challenge is them. What do we do with them? Here, our Muslim brothers and sisters in the US, what do we do with them? We separate ourselves from them? Or we have this encounter and they will change and we will change together. And this is the challenge that we have in the Middle East. I'm a minority group in Lebanon. We are less than 30% Christians. In Syria, we are less than 5%. We have a majority Muslims. What do? We live hospitality. And Christ's hospitality will change them. But to cling to our service and history and past, which is valuable, but Christ pushes us further. Are you hospitable? And probably this is why we are not able to make an impact as a church. Because many times we are not hospitable. Sorry, I'm a preacher.
What keeps coming back to me is what Jesus said, and that is to love your neighbor as yourself. Is not a Muslim a neighbor? You know, it's how do we love Muslims as neighbors? And we don't have to, we have to know who we are in Christ in order to do that. And before I left for Lebanon, the first country that was part of my research project, our professor of Islamics then, Evelyn Rice-Hachet, she was challenging me, how are you going to get through this? And I had her to dinner with Farida, and the thing that she kept stressing, and what I have come to learn is, I have to know who I am in Christ. We're at a conference on worship. Worship is done in beautiful ways. We have to be more than just planning worship programs, and that's why I love this conference, because it is about more than that. But we need to really grow in our relationship with the Lord. It strengthens us when we're pushed outside our boundaries to realize, oh, you mean Jesus was talking about this as well. Oh, and it's like for me, who went to Africa going, can you use me, God, a woman and a musician? That doesn't fit anything, you know? And it's like, it just keeps peeling the layers of an onion. We go deeper and deeper. And so as we reach out to Muslims, and as we do daily living, we go deeper with Christ. And we see, and we can really live that Christ in us, the hope of glory. You know, and so much so that Summer, whose real name is Samir, but she learned quickly that Americans can't say Samir. She was in Layali Zaman, the Middle East ensemble that I sang in, and pretty soon she was asking me, well, they needed a place to perform. What did I do? We performed at Lake Avenue Church, provided a place for them to hold a concert. And out of that, Samir said, I want to come to your church. And she came and she sang with our choir for 3 years. There was only one problem. After 3 years, she says, that guy up there talks too long. But anyway, what I'm trying to say is, Christ is stronger than any contamination and any compromise. Amen. And if we know Christ, and we're worshiping and we're connected with Him, He gives us that inner strength that we need to just enjoy the neighbors He's given us.
I just wanted to say quickly that when we talk about hospitality, I lived in the UK, and that's why I studied. And one of the things that I found that was really counterculture to me was, and I came to appreciate why that was happening, is what people tell children when they are growing up. You don't talk to strangers. The stranger is made into something you fear. You don't go near strangers. You don't talk to strangers. And of course, I grew up telling my kids the same thing in the UK, don't talk to strangers. But over time, it has an effect on society. That what you don't know becomes something you have to fear necessarily. And so, what is that doing to us as a society? We begin to build our walls up right from a young age. And when you talk about hospitality, living in America here, I tell my American friends that Americans are very, very generous. But that doesn't necessarily always translate to being hospitable. It is one thing to be generous, it's another thing to be hospitable. And, you know, in the UK, people talk about the white man's house is their castle, or something to that effect. It's their castle. And I tell my friends in the UK that in Africa, when you want to really show someone that you care, you don't invite them to your home, you go to their home. You go to their home. You go visit them. You show up. And when the Bible talks about, for God so loved the world, that God showed up in the person of Jesus. God did not send a text message. God showed up. If we want to really be hospitable, if hospitality doesn't cost you anything, it is not hospitality. It's not hospitality by nature is costly. And unless we are prepared to go through it and to really make ourselves vulnerable in the process, unless we allow certain level of vulnerability, you can't be hospitable. When you are clinging on to everything you have and you know. So it comes with some kind of discomfort, vulnerability, and at some level, some kind of cost. So I think that if we are really Christian and we really want to live our Christian values, for me, one of the fears I have and I've lived in America here for about 10 years now, one of the fears I have for Western societies, especially in America now, is that we might be winning the battles against the terrorists in the battlefields with the bombs, but the terrorist seems to be winning in terms of changing our values and our DNA of our society, of who we are, of our society. Because we are becoming very fearful and we are prepared to throw away our values for reasons of security and all of that. And that for me is troubling. A Pakistani Christian convert to Islam, from Islam to Christianity, visited me in my office in the UK once, and he told me, he said, "John, I'm afraid for the UK." And I said to him, "Why?" He said, "You know, I became a Christian because of the compassion in Christianity. Now I see that Christians are thrown that away. They are thrown compassion away. And when the Christian faith is kind of emptied of that compassion, of love, what do we have left?" So for me, that is it is the changing of our values and what it is that defines us. And I say in Africa that I am deeply concerned about radical Islam, not just because radical Islam is radicalizing young Muslims, but I am very concerned because radical Islam is radicalizing Christians. It's making Christians very angry, very fearful, very defensive. Radical Islam is radicalizing our societies. And that is my deepest concern.
All right, we welcome your questions, please. Yeah, in the back.
I'm gonna
Speak loudly,
I'm
too.
gonna tell two stories instead of asking a question. Okay. Our second son was involved with crew in Azerbaijan. Azerbaijan is largely a Muslim country, at least culturally. They lived in a very small Soviet-era block apartment building. Didn't have room for us to stay when we visited. So they talked to their Muslim friend who lived a half a block down the road. His family, well, he was a nominal Muslim. His family was in the U.S. because he had the green card lottery. And so Nate asked him if we could stay there. And he said, "Oh, absolutely." So we lived in his apartment for a week. And he was so gracious to us that if we didn't get home exactly on time by his clock, he would call my son and say he was concerned about us not being home because he was worried about us. He fed us, he was very generous, and he's a Muslim, okay? Hospitality is a big thing for Muslims. I believe he's now living in the States. But number two, we used to live very close to Michigan State University. We had a lot of interaction with internationals. they had a professorial exchange program with a university in Turkey. And this fellow came over, and he was sort of their guard dog, pardon the expression. But he had to keep these people away from Christians because he didn't want them polluted. The Muslims didn't want to be polluted by the Christians. When his charges left, he contacted us and said, "Can I come and live with you? I don't want to live with all these party people." Okay, so he lived with us for a semester. He sat in with our family devotions. He went to the Passion of the Christ movie with us. He kept in contact with us when he went back to Turkey. I don't think he's a Christian, but those are two of our Muslim stories.
All right, questions, please. Yeah.
This is kind of just a question for each of you to individually answer from your experiences, but I'm kind of interested on the common ground. Najla, you were saying that you talk to your students about the values that you share. So I'm wondering, just if you could talk a little bit more about kind of, like what values you share with your students. And for Dr. King, the same kind of with music, from kind of a Western side and the Middle Eastern side, what are the commonalities there? And for John as well, when you converted to Christianity, what mindsets shifted over that were the same? And what's the stuff that kind of merges together that you find in your experiences?
Yeah, some of our students, they are reformed and they don't know. Because, the impact of, for example, honesty, transparency, respecting the other, these are taught, values are taught in our schools, And for sure, they know about Christ. As you said, sometimes they come to us after 20 years and they tell us how that story in chapel changed them. I think also, especially in the Middle East, because we are a diverse group, they learn to accept the different person. And these are one of the values. Like if you think differently, this doesn't mean you are bad. And that's very important. This is why I always tell our church that our schools are our better pulpit. Why? Because a Muslim will not feel comfortable to come and worship with you in church in the Middle East. And I understand the struggle of the family. If you're a convert, you are attacked by the family. But they would love to come to our schools. Because they feel respected. First, because we have good education. We have openness, in that. And in these schools, they are shaped. We are called in the Middle East, the Reformed Church, the Big Ben of the Middle East. So many of these kids, they are raised, these are small things, but to love the other person, to care not only for yourself, but to the people around you, is something that's also taught in our schools. So they go out with these values. And you know why they respect us? Because we don't deal with them like they are a field for evangelism. They are a field to share Christ with them, to love them the way Christ loves them. And at the end, Christ knows the journey. It's not in our hands, sometimes. But we don't compromise what we think about. And the more difficult part, in schools there's a direct curriculum and there's a hidden curriculum. Sometimes the hidden curriculum is the worst because you could do all this preaching and chapels and all that, and these people, they don't feel like you mean it. So the more that the school has this integrity about what we talk and how we deal with them, when a child will come and his parents saw his parents beating each other the night before, what do you do as a teacher? You care of them. And these are, they're ready to trust you, to share stories of their lives. So how precious that is. And how precious it is to continue with them. And for sure, this hospitality, this caring, will change them.
Thank you for your question. What values and commonalities in the musical domain? Having Najla here just reminds me of when I was in Beirut. And our project sponsored a concert that I think demonstrates what you're asking for. And that is Muslims and Christians can perform the same musics together, you see. And at the High Superior School of Music in Beirut, Nida Abumrad leads it, who happens to be an Orthodox Christian, and he's brilliant in the way he's brought together this musical ensemble that builds on the historic folk literature and the religious literature, and they do it's a classic Arab music ensemble. So what it is, so they use the kanun, which is, and he plays the violin, Middle Eastern style, and the oud. And then there's an imam who sings and an Orthodox priest who sings. You see, and they're brought together on the same stage. Well, I was talking, and we did it at Nest, is that it? Nest, yeah. And we held the concert at Nest, and I knew some people, evangelical people, and they weren't sure they'd come, but they came. And they were Lebanese. And the man was a professor, so he was ready to be academic, get into it, and he brought his wife. They were touched so profoundly. They went through major paradigm shifts. I mean, it's just symbolic to look at who's on the stage. We also had, what's my friend at ABTS, Martin Akkad. And so in between, in the intermission, or the break, they had an imam, well known in Beirut, and they had the imam speak and talk about how he loves music, because there's this misnomer that Muslims don't like music. There's haram and halal. Yeah. And so it's forbidden, and when is it not forbidden? And so this is showing the imam gets up and says, I love music. It's right there, it's breaking stereotypes. And what it does is it puts you into this environment, brief as it may be, 2 to 3 hours, where you have a profound experience of being together and realizing what you do have in common. So our work, I have a book and a video that's available. I also have a website, but I couldn't access it this morning, so I've got to check. But the book is Uncommon Sounds, with brackets around the un. Songs of Peace and Rings. So what we discovered, for me personally, as I said, I'm an outside, I didn't grow up in the context of being outside of the States. So we realized that all of a sudden you bracket on, and there's all sorts of ways to find commonness. And it's just our lack, well, first of all, our fear and our lack of experience of being with Muslims.
Yeah, thanks. For me, one of the things that people have asked me when I became a Muslim, a Christian from Islam, one of the questions that I had asked of me was, did you feel like you were switching gods? When you come, did you feel like you were switching gods? And I said at one point, I said something to the effect that, not really. But what I felt was like I was watching an image in black and white television. Some of you are old enough to know black and white television. And I was now watching the same image in a color television. So that is how it came across to me. So I didn't feel I was switching gods, but I just saw God in a much more intimate, deeper ways. And so I brought God with me, if you like. But I also brought the sense of the sacred, that kind of sense of hollowness, of holiness, of the otherness of God. Something, and I got a sense that for many years I wouldn't put my Bible on the floor because it's sacred. So that sense of holiness, of sacredness, I brought that with me. And sometimes I get a sense that especially Protestant Christians we are losing that sense of sacredness. Yes, there are problems with sacred space, and therefore we become very exclusivist and very, very territorial with sacred space. But there is something to be valued about Christians or Muslims about sacredness and how to treat our lives as we live our lives, that we are set apart. We are set apart. So I brought that sense of sacredness with me also. But one of the things that I really valued from my Christian tradition, my Christian faith also, that I felt like in Islam, there was that kind of disconnection all the time, even though with God, and that sense of being included in the family of God. In Islam, we are taught that you are a servant of Allah. You are a servant of God, and there's a lot of pleasure to even have the opportunity. It's a privilege to serve God. But in Christianity, you are taught of you are being a child of God. You are a child of God, and for me, there's a deeper level of inclusion there that I found very, very profound for me personally. But one of the things that I also found very helpful is one of my first experience in church worship in high school that turned me around was when I walked into a Christian, in those days we call it Scripture Union. It's a student union service, and I walked in there with my Christian friend, and what struck me were two things. First, I saw young men and young women seated together. That was unheard of for me. And I grew up with my sisters. My mom had sisters, girls. I was the only boy. So I grew up with my sisters. So I was very close to my sisters. And so to see it, the only place I was separated from my sisters was when we went to the mosque. And that was always very, very hard for me, to be taken away from my sisters. And so to walk into that space and to see young men and young women seated together, there was something so that was just connected with me. But also the second thing was they were reading the Bible in different, in English, but then they will say, explain it in your own language, what it means to you. And I was like, so we can talk about these things in our own language? I didn't know that. So those kinds of things really kind of, I value, and those are the things that I treasure.
So I have a question, Dr. Azumah. You just mentioned that you didn't feel you switched God, with which I agree, but the image you gave, the color TV and black and white TV, which to me it seems it suggests that there is no really essential or deep differences between understanding of God in Islamic theology and Christian theology. My question would be, as I know from my own studies of Islam, Islam and Christianity obviously disagree about worshiping Jesus Christ. Christians worship Jesus Christ as God's incarnation. Muslims disagree with that. Christians also worship God as a triune God, while Christianity, Islam, I'm sure you know from the scriptures, the Quran, that really is quite against that kind of conceptualization of God. So my question to you would be, when you became a Christian, how did you maybe reconcile those two different views, or were there anything specific in Islamic understanding of God that you thought, okay, this is something that doesn't fit my new worldview and I'm gonna abandon it?
What did I lead myself into now? No, seriously speaking, the whole Christian concept of the Trinity is something that we Christians we feel very strongly about, and also that Islam feels equally strongly against. But I teach world Christianity, and I teach early Christian history, and all the ecumenical councils and all the debates that went on into those kinds of formulations that we now have today. For me, my journey in Christianity was never a head trip. I didn't sit down to read and to figure things out and, it makes sense. No. It evolved. In my journey, in my relationship with God, in my study of scripture, and I believe that knowing who Jesus is and knowing who God really is like what Jesus said to Peter, flesh and blood did not reveal this to you. It's my Father in heaven. It takes God's Son to reveal God's Son in God's fullness to us. And so sometimes I feel like we get too hung over on the debates. And that is what I over time, I have lost interest in those kinds of debates, because I'm like, for Muslims, and as an African Christian, religion is not about the head knowledge alone. Head knowledge is important, but it's not that alone. I sometimes feel like in the West here, we've reduced religion to just another kind of body of knowledge that you've got to acquire. But I think religion has something to say about what we were talking about earlier, how we live. I teach in seminaries. I've taught in seminary all these years, and I joke with my biblical, my Bible professors. I said, we spend time in seminary interrogating the Bible every day. We hardly pause and allow the Bible to interrogate us. So for me, I think that it is that kind of journey that I am on, rather than sitting down and studying and figuring out what makes sense and what doesn't make sense. That has not been a big part of my journey.
And it's grace.
And it's grace.
Yeah, and then with that, we could, even pose it, okay, what about Judaism? They're equally opposed to Trinity. And we talk, so, yeah, it's a fair question, and I won't.
And I've got an article on that. If you want, I will push it to you, and then we can have a conversation.
But I do find it interesting that Christians are like, in no way would we say, oh, we're never worship the same God as Jews. But with Muslims, not at all. I think that's the impulse of many. And so I do find that we need to keep those conversations equally in our minds. And so, Anne, you had a question about.
Yeah, you said that the media really promotes a lot of fear and stuff. And honestly, I don't look at the media that much, but most of what I know about Muslims actually comes from places like Voice of the Martyrs. Would you say that they're dealing a lot with radical Islam then?
Voice of the Martyrs, Christian persecution, the ones that talk about all the different places where Christians are persecuted.
Yeah, this is out of radical Islam for sure. This is the outcome of radical Islam, which is interpretation. Radical Islam is based on interpreting the Quran in a special way, and they think they are the real ones. In this one, did I answer you right? This was the question. That is this related not from media but from
one Christian publishing arm that the Voice of the Martyrs goes around the world giving snapshots of areas where Christians are being persecuted, and they those are the stories they tell.
Yeah, but they are persecuted by radical groups. I don't think if we've lived all our life with Muslims, we were not persecuted as Christians, but the radical groups are the one, and they persecute other Muslims. I was in Iraq, in the prison in Iraq. I visited the women's prison, and then they did not let me to go into the prison of the men, who were all ISIS. And the man in charge of prison, who's a Muslim, told me that they will provide food for his prisoners, and he's a Muslim. They tell him, we don't take it from your hand. Put it on the ground, because you are profane, we take it. They don't only persecute other Christians, they persecute other Muslims. Under the title, the real interpretation of Islam, going back to those. So this is these groups, radical groups, they think that they're doing what God wants from them. And that's scary, because this is how can you end up this interpretation? I mean, you could stop the weapons, you can stop the media, but can you stop the interpretation, this teaching? And that's risky.
And if I may add to something a little briefly to what Najla has said, that for me, it's also what we feed our minds with is very, very important. That's where the whole idea of media comes in. I think we all agree that when you take certain substances, abuse of drugs and abuse of, it's going to affect your life. It's going to affect your body. It's going to affect your health. The same way what we read and what we watch, what we feed our minds with regularly, it's going to have an impact on the way we think and even the way we behave. It's going to inform our attitudes. And so I am very careful, especially to young people, what is it that you are feeding your mind with on a regular basis? If all that you are feeding, and that's what ISIS does, it produces these images that are horrific, that induces fear, and it shares that on social media, and people, young people who watch those videos become radicalized over time. The same thing some Christian groups are also doing. We produce all kind of negative images, and yes, those are all, most of it are true. The persecution is there. But if all that we watch is those images, it's going to have an impact on the way you think about all of Islam and all of Muslims. I know some Christian groups also who use those kinds of images as a kind of a propaganda tool to demonize all of Islam. What they don't say is that there are Muslims on the ground who feel just as strongly against these kinds of persecution of minorities. You go to Pakistan, where some of the persecution is at its sharpest, and you find Muslim lawyers who are defending Christians, sometimes at the cost of their lives. We don't hear those things in those kinds of stories. So for me, I'm a Christian from the majority world. I live with Muslims, and I tell my Western Christian friends that I'm so thankful that when there's a persecution and churches are burned down, we get aid to rebuild the churches and to roof the churches. I thank God for that. But my job is to stop the churches from being burned down in the first place. And we cannot do that when we demonize all of Muslims and all of Islam, because we have to work with them in order to stop this the persecution. Like she said, it's Muslims themselves. When I go back to Ghana and I meet my sister is more concerned about radical Islam than I am. My sister is the one who starts the topic. Do you know this is happening nowadays? Do you see the young men? Do you see how they... She is so concerned because she knows that when trouble starts, they are going to be the first in the front line. So we need to keep this in perspective.
On that, there's a recent, it happens quite often, my Kenyan students will tell me this, but in the news I saw recently that there was Al-Shabaab in Kenya, is a Muslim extremist group, and they were plotting to go to a construction site, a local construction site, and kill Christians that are working there. And it was actually a group of Muslims who found out about this, who went to the construction site to warn, and the Christians were able to flee without being killed. So these stories from my Kenyan students say this happens quite often. So, along with your points. Yeah. I saw a hand here, and then I'll scan over here. Yeah.
So in our church in Toronto, we're trying experiments with hospitality with Muslims. And some of the things you've said today, all of you have spoken very directly into it. Is there a way to keep a dialogue going beyond today?
Amongst
or whoever would like. Is there? I've never been to this symposium or this minute. So is there a way to keep a dialogue going? Because we're running into good stuff and bad stuff, and stuff that's working, and we're making a lot of mistakes, and it's all really good. But
yeah, I would point to two people briefly on it. I'll let you speak. Greg Sinclair in Canada. He's doing a lot of good work, and he's with the Christian Reformed Church in Canada, so I can get you his contact information.
No, I think.
And then I would also put you to Paul, right here in the front row. He will follow. If you want to keep the conversation going, Paul will know what you would. Do you know other, like who should they read? Who should they, are there online forums that you would point people to?
Or are you folks blogging or
Yeah.
on the subject?
Or we introduce them to Middle Easterners. We have people in the context of Canada. I have some pastors who came from Syria, and they are found in Canada, and they can do lots of interpretation. This is why, I feel as Christians living in the Middle East with Islam, we have an important role of being a bridge for interpretation. And that helps, how would communities deal with that. So we have we have four pastors for our church in Canada left from Syria. And they understand the context well. And I think these are more valuable than blogs, I think. I'm ready to be in touch. But they could help in these situations. Because you need somebody who understands the West, understands the Middle East, who creates a trust bridge to talk, I think that's very important.
That's a wonderful suggestion. I don't really have, other than the academic world, and I have the books on unclean sounds and a video available. I do have an example that I'll be presenting tomorrow, 11:45, of churches coming together and working with local Syrian refugees who have moved into Southern California. Now, how they are dialoguing with Middle Easterners or Muslims, I do know that this event that I went to was just paradigm shifting. So I'd invite you to that, and then find ways to band together as a local community. Maybe you're doing that already.
Yeah, we are.
Yeah, I think it's being with people who understand the context, both in the States and in the arenas like Middle East and African Islam. It's being with the people who know it from the inside that would help continue the dialogue.
The only thing I would point out with that too is, and this is something that particularly having those Christians from the Middle East help with this, is that what we intend to be hospitable may not always be, it may not be a need. So I've noticed that a lot. A lot of it has to do, I think, with your categories of service versus hospitality. But one thing that was eye-opening for me is that I go to Church of the Servant right around the block from here, and we have a community that meets. It's called a basic English service, but it's for immigrants and refugees mostly. And then a few of us from North America. Well, one of the things that was interesting, I was in a training, and a leadership training, and there was a Congolese refugee, and we were talking about hospitality, and he said to me, since I've been here, people have been so giving, and they give a lot, and it's I appreciate that. But he said, but where I come from, you don't need to make an arrangement ahead of time. You just show up. And if you show up, I'll stop what I'm doing. I'll bring out food and drink. And it's a way of, it lets me know that we are really close relationally. You honor me by just not making an appointment ahead of time. He said, but when people visit me now that I'm here, I'm grateful for what they've given me. But when they come to visit me, they never want anything. Oh, I don't want to trouble you. Mm-hmm. And he said this, and I'll never forget. He said, unless you're willing to receive from me, I can't open my heart to you. Right. Mm-hmm. And all of a sudden, my world was like, oh my gosh, what are we doing? Like, how much do we think we're helping out these immigrants and refugees that actually may be alienating? And so I think there's a lot about receiving hospitality and putting being displaced ourselves. That I think, particularly if you're in a North American majority cultural context, you need to be the guest. And finding ways of allowing people to host you in that case.
That's exactly what we did. I mean, we literally opened up our church hall for the local Muslim group to host us in their dinner.
Great.
It was a lot easier working with the Arab Community Center than it was working with our own church. And those are the kind of things I need dialogue on, like how besides just modeling it, how do we teach our people that, look guys, you can't act the way you're acting to these people. That's not hospitable, that's not showing or receiving us.
I want to moderate. I'm afraid. I have some other things that.
And I don't want to take over the dialogue.
Those are not on the ground. How do you help form and lead? This is where the starting point. Big hearts, generous, but maybe alienating in their generosity. How do we lead them into more mutuality and reciprocity? Yeah. Thank you for that. Yeah. Here and then I saw something.
Hello, I come from the most Muslim populated country, Indonesia. So I might ask a more practical question. As a minority family, we've been trying to be hospitable to our neighborhood, but then they might not want to get into our house, knowing that we've been living with our dog. Or even they don't receive what we offer, our food, for example, knowing that might contain pork in it, and even they stop me teaching my Muslim neighborhood, like Muslim kid, voluntarily. They stop me knowing that I'm Christian. I know that there are lots of things that we can do, but could you give some insight regarding that experience? Thank you.
Well, yeah, you can tell that we are academics, we don't do practical things. No, but seriously, the issue of how do you practically live out and engage in a majority Muslim community like Indonesia as such a very tiny minority there. And I think that all the things that you are doing are the right things, because one of the issues of giving gifts during festivals is something that we do a lot in our part of the world. Muslims give gifts to us, and we give gifts. In fact, it is expected. When it's Christmas, the Muslims are waiting for the dog. They are waiting for it. So if you don't show up, they are not going to be very pleased with you. And they know that you will not serve them food that they will not eat. Because there's that kind of trust, release of trust. And therefore, one of the things that I think you are hitting at is suspicion and mistrust. And you can't really engage in the community at deeper levels when you have issues of trust. We've got to deal with that issue of mistrust. And the question is, how do you build trust first within the community? And I think you do that by really getting to know them and let them know that you are genuine in your relationship with them. You are seeking the welfare of the kids. You are teaching them mathematics and English or whatever it is for them to be able to excel in their schools. And sometimes trust, you don't earn it in an instant. It takes time. So I would say don't give up, persevere, and that is the way to build the trust.
Don't give pork.
And don't give the poor, of course. Which I know you will not. Yeah. And so, with time, I think that some of the kids that you interact with, they are those who are going to even be your witnesses. When you build the trust of the kids are those who will tell their parents what you actually do with them, and that is where you begin. So it's about building trust. Knowing the kids' names, seeing their parents and asking calling the kid by the name, how is he doing? Just some of those little things. Visiting them, as you said, I'm a neighbor here, I want to know, there's anything I can do to help. just let them know you are genuine. And because growing up as a Muslim, one thing my parents keep saying to me is, don't talk to Christians. Don't talk to Christians. And that is because they feel that Christians are always eager to convert you. They want to change you at the very first meeting. So he said, sure. So that is something that is also deeply ingrained in our mind. So I will say that you have to work very patiently and very gradually to build a trust first.
And what I have seen when I was in Yogyakarta, just outside of Georgia, is that work in community, women's community development groups where they work together and they have a common focus that is on the community. It's neither Christian, it's neither Muslim. Then as an ethnomusicologist, what did I discover? Well, they had a women's singing group. And there were Christians and Muslims singing together, and the group, the woman was a Muslim, the group leader was a Muslim woman, and they were coming together and singing. So what keeps coming up to me, and you know the situation better than I do, but doing things in groups is less threatening than you come to my house for food. You'll be all alone and we'll get you. So that seems, from my experience, that seems to be a place to begin and do that. So you find you have to build that relationship of trust with someone who is Muslim, and then you have this common goal of creating a group where you can work together.
Yeah, I want to say our schools in celebration of Furlough, sort of fasting month, we do feast to invite the students, and the community, and we do it their way, We don't do it in our way, we are very careful. We really agree that's halal, and accepted by them. And we sit and eat together. That changes them. I want to say, many Muslims feel food is very important in the Middle East.
Yes. And wonderful. It's going to got a feast. Oh, I love that mesa.
Not really. Yeah, Midwest. I don't know if cuisine is really the Asian.
Now we get into this.
Maybe Russ's or Culver's, I guess, is it?
But I want to say, I've heard it from my Muslim friends. Sometimes they feel looked down to them. Like we are at least as Christians. And sometimes we don't notice ourselves. Although this is always surprising. Imagine our Christ was crucified. And here is humiliated. He was humiliated. Our God was humiliated in God. And we are at this. I don't know how this combination happens. And I'm talking about us, I'm not talking about you. In the Middle East, we are like this. So it takes humbleness from our side. And I'm not saying that all Muslims are not, they are very humble. But there's this general trend that we have to be humble and try to do it her way. It will not destroy our doctrine. If we get to feed them the way in a lovely way, we understand, this the same way we do with our Jewish friends. They take care of the way they eat also. So, but it creates a community of coming together and learning from each other. And probably when you trust, you talk about it. Why don't you eat it? I had a friend with me one time. I was on a wonderful trip of a Muslim group from the Middle East, arranged by the church in Germany, introducing them to the Reformation. And we were only 2 Christians. So we were stopping on all the Reformation sites and had lectures about what happened there. And it was so interesting to see how they were seeing the Reformation. They were very happy with the understanding of it. Anyway, one of our friends loved the sausages. And we were eating sausages all the time. And then I said, do you know this is pork? I said, really? Don't tell anybody. When But it takes trust. But if I attack him, he will be. If he attacks me, I will be also defensive.
I think one thing with the, and each context is different, and I've learned this more and more from my students, but sometimes there are contexts in which there are already feuding tribes or feuding ethnic groups, and then Christianity and Islam come in and gets laid upon those pre-existing things, and it fuels it and it adds to a justification. So what I want to say is that each context is different, right? So if you're talking about, it's not just Christian, Muslim. I know in Indonesia, a lot of Christian churches, at least the ones, the Indonesian students who come to Calvin Seminary, are of Chinese descent. So then you have an ethnic onlay, in addition to religion. So there are, it takes bridge building. So one of the concepts that I think is helpful is finding a person of peace. And that is, there's who in that community is open to some sort of friendship, some sort of relationship. Who is, from that side, who is the Muslim in your context, who you see is trying to build bridges? And probably require you first going onto their turf, receiving their hospitality, particularly around children. Children are I know a local, one of my friends here, African American pastor here in the city, a local CRC church is trying to reach out to the neighborhood kids. A lot of the neighborhood kids are African American, and we're trying to be benevolent. Why isn't this working? And African American friend who's a pastor said, you have to go to the grandmas. You have to win over the trust of the local grandmas, because they're the ones that are the doorway to their children if you really want them. But and so that's where you start, and I don't know what that looks like quite, in Indonesia, but that's where you have to be that student. The good intention may even incite suspicion, and so finding that person of peace, maybe even being going on to their turf to win. Okay, with this person, yeah, he's a Christian, but he's not going to do anything that would harm the community. It's just slower work, and so I hesitate to speak too much about a context that I'm not an expert in. But I think what I've gleaned from our panelists and others like them is that kind of long work, particularly when there's layers of suspicion or hostility. I saw a hand over here.
Yeah, kind of general question for all three. We talked a lot about overcoming fear, and in particular in the Western context. I lived over in North Africa for about 3 years, and I have a lot of Muslim friends, as well as I have a lot of Christian friends who come from, the Coptic tradition. And a lot of them have this kind of sense of fear, like, oh my goodness, how can you be a friend, or even, have this relationship with your Muslim friend Mahmoud or whatever. And you're so. My question onto you guys, I guess, would be how would you explain to, and I noticed this too even at the Arabic church back in Calgary, how do you explain to an Arabic Christian or kind of encourage them, or what's your biggest piece of advice for them to overcome that kind of general fear that there is of Muslims in general, I guess?
Good. You speak it.
Yeah. So how do I convince the Arabic Christian?
Yeah, who have that sense of fear.
Here in the States, in North America?
In general. In particular, let's think about the Middle East, because there is a lot of political oppression and stuff like that they kind of have that fear towards we don't want to reach out.
If they go together, they're not suspicious. As I mentioned before, if they are suspicious of radical Muslims. To me, I'm worried that as a woman, that somebody will come and change my lifestyle. I have to be veiled, and all that, If a moderate Muslim will not interfere in that, but if radical groups became empowered in Lebanon, they will force women to dress like that, and they will change our lifestyle. In this situation, we are afraid from such groups, not only me, other Lebanese women who are Muslim, and they're not faked, So this is the fear that is found in the Middle East. the aggressive Islam. But the moderate Islam, our children, they live together. You know, in Lebanon, I don't know if you know, following up on the news, we have strikes. The young people have been on strikes for 1 month. Not for 1 month, 100 days. And the strikes are Muslim and Christian young people. What's their cause? Calling to stop corruption in Lebanon. And at the same time, they're talking about the economy and they're challenging the government and challenging the society. You should see this beautiful move of young people speaking pro-justice. These are not scared from each other, you know. And these are young men and women. They go together to university and they love each other sometimes. You know, they live together. The fear is that when you have wars, when you have radicalism, you start killing. You're killed because you're a Christian. This is the fear that happens in general. Sometimes there are radical Christians who don't in the Middle East, who don't want to deal with another Muslim. That's a problem. Because in here, you are a minority. What do you do with all these 70%, 80% in your country? You know, these are our neighbors. What do you do? So it's ridiculous now. I don't feel like, but it takes one incident to make people scared, as I mentioned at the beginning. You know, somebody, a Muslim killing a Christian, or you know, rape incident or something like that, and people become too. But in general, I mean, these are our neighbors. We grew with them. We have the same jokes. You know, we have. Yeah, I mean, you could tell an American joke, I won't understand it. You know, but with another Middle Eastern, I will understand that. And this is when I travel. You know, I see Muslim refugees on the trains in Europe. They come to me. They don't ask I'm a Christian. We have lots of things that we share together. You know, and this is the beauty of the Middle East. The ugliness that we see now is not this. You know, let me tell you. I read an article last week. Somebody saying, are these the reformed people, or the evangelicals, they call them, that the same evangelicals who came to the Middle East 1823 and started the Protestant churches? Are these the same evangelicals we see on the TV today? You know, which is incidents, and we're embarrassed to say, we don't know how to answer sometimes. So when you have these lines, you know, it changes, the radicalism changes. But we want to live in the Middle East. As Middle Easterners, we have a beautiful culture. And the beauty of it is Islam. Nobody, you know, many of us have the choice to live outside. We choose to live in our country. We have a beautiful Middle East. Yes. And this is why nobody tells us to go and live outside, to design for us where we want to live. We don't want to live neither in Europe nor in the US. We want to live in our country. And we want to appreciate. And we won't want to stop because we don't want our young people to dream of going outside the Middle East. It's a beautiful culture. And the beauty of it is Islam. And the hospitality. And the relations. And I tell my husband, it's a crazy country, but I love it. But you know, this is where we live there. I mean, I don't know what you heard, probably the stories that Middle Easterners are afraid of other Muslims. I don't know, probably it could be a story, a specific story.
And I think if it may be because of I have some Egyptian friends who have similar kinds of concerns.
That's where I live, so.
That's where you work, yeah.
Oh, there you go.
So Egypt is it's not just particular to Egypt, but you find it as you said, even in some places like even Africa, as I said earlier. For me, the issue is how communities share and demonize the other over generations. And the issue of sectarianism is deep. When you go to Egypt as an American, any Muslim or Christian will have to talk to you, but will they be happy to talk to each other and to engage one another? there are Muslims in my own country who will share information freely with, when a white guy shows up and says, I'm doing this research and I want this information, they will share with them freely. When I show up, it's different. You get it? So, and vice versa. So, we need to be mindful of these things. But for me, what I say to the Lebanese example is so exciting. The recent kind of demonstration in Lebanon, that the younger generation have come to a point that they realize that our leaders have fooled us over the generations. They've used sectarianism to divide us. They've demonized us, the other to us for generations. Yet we live together, we go to the same schools, and they use that to cover their own corruption and incompetence. They use that to perpetuate themselves in power. We need to rise up against that. And I think if that wind that is beginning in Lebanon can blow to other parts of the Middle East, this Sunni Shia sectarianism that is so deep that they can't see eye to eye with each other. And it's the leaders who are feeding it. They are stoking the fears, stoking the divisions. And I think that even in our own country here in the United States, fear sells, hatred sells, and people buy it. So for me, it's the clergy, it's the responsibility of the leadership. When you begin to sell these things to your society and people buy it, it's only when society comes to a point that they realize that enough is enough. The Muslim next door, if he wanted to really cut off my head, he would have done it a long time ago. That is only the time that we can be challenge these narratives and these stereotypical kind of voices out there and move on as a community, as a society.
Thank you. More question? Yeah.
Really interested in you sharing about, I think I heard you right saying there's multiple schools that you're helping run in Lebanon. This goes for everyone too. But how do you create a culture in every one of those schools where the teachers and the staff have a heart that is focused on loving people instead of trying to convert them? And you use the analogy of opening up bridges. I'm wondering if there's like just things you consistently say or truths you consistently go back to create those cultures in the school. I'm a Christian school teacher, and the idea of uniting the staff around an idea is really intriguing. It's really incredible that you can have that at multiple different sites. So I'm just wondering, what are those consistent things you go back to with your staff to unite that culture?
You know, it's related to our identity and theology as a Protestant church, you know, and it starts with the leadership of the schools, you know. So there is an ethos in these schools that run in all our schools, how we think theologically, and why are these schools? These schools are to, there is a motto that we use, I came that we may have life and have it abundantly. And we believe that we want to help these young people to have life abundant, you know, the dignity of human beings, knowing Christ, and all this. It's accepting them, you know. It is, and it's not by what you speak, it's by what you don't speak. Mm-hmm. It's not the hidden curriculum in the schools, you know. So it's the administration, for example. It's how we take our decisions. Our teachers are Muslims and Christians, you know. We have one school in the south that is almost 100% Shiite. Only one Christian, son of the principal. But you should see, you know, working with these around 1,300, and they called me as an ordained pastor to go and be the speaker in the graduation of that school. And who's sitting there? Oh my God, the mufti of the community there. But they accept us, you know, they accept the whole thing. You know why? Because they know we don't attack them. They know we love their kids. You know, and it's a feeling in the school that runs. You know, we're accepting these people, and we didn't open these schools only to open Presbyterian churches. We opened these schools to share the love of Christ. I want to tell you, we are around 400,000, you know, evangelicals in Lebanon, and 400 evangelicals, which means Protestants, all in the line of the Reformation. And in imagine, we were the first church to teach women in the whole Ottoman Empire. At that time, it was shameful for women to go to school. And you know how it started? It started with the wives of the missionaries, bringing the children, the girls, into their homes.
We did something good.
Yes, this is why the USA withdrawing from Ministry of Schools is a great loss. You know, I know about this USA. You know, so imagine these girls were brought into the homes of the wives of the, and they started to teach them. Then they opened schools. Now it's shameful for women not to go to school. And we have Lebanon and Syria has a good number of educated women. And this is a small minority who could create an impact. You know, I think when you believe in it, no matter you're a minority or not, you're strong. And this is where I say these schools are very valuable. And when we lose, because you know, 70% of the Lebanese, they go to private schools. In Lebanon, education is our bedrock. We sell lands and teach our children. Education is something very, imagine, you are teaching 70, not only us, the Catholics have also schools, and the Orthodox have schools, but majority is run by Christians in them. And this is the shape. You see why the strikes in Lebanon are different from the other strikes in the other parts of the East? Because education. And I always say, you know, when churches don't focus on education, we lose them. So what do we do? Sometimes we worry very much that a Muslim cannot continue his studies because he doesn't have money to continue. It's a great loss because this Muslim have lost the chance of growing in the modern. At the time, there's lots of Islamic money pouring into the area to open schools, you know, and to teach them. You know. So this is a place to where young people will be together, will grow together, will think together, will shape the country together. You know. And I tell you, many of our students are in key positions. I remember in our new cabinet now, we have 6 women in Lebanon. They always look at the reform and say, you started in the beginning, you have to continue about women's place in the country. So yes, these schools, they shape. At the same time, churches, they have limited servants to have this outreach for the society. It shapes a country, it shapes a generation. And corruption, this is where our values of the school will go out and speak against corruption that's happening in the country.
I would like to speak to the leadership level, which is what you're asking. And I would like to suggest that in training our teachers, that they wear certain spectacles, which we all know and study, and that is, we are made in the image of God. And somehow we've allowed the media and the impact and the pressures to look at people, well, this happens. We villainize people whenever we're in kind of wars. And all of a sudden, you know, during World War II, it wasn't a German, it was a Kraut, you know, and a Kraut is cabbage, sauerkraut, you know. And I think this is happening for us. So in helping our teachers in the schools, give them glasses to see every student, Muslim, Hindu, Jewish, Christian, as being made in the image of God. And if everyone is made in the image of God, how do we treat them? You know, so then that gives you, if you're the principal or the leader, then we also need to model that. And it's our interactions with students. And in the classroom and outside of the classroom with the families. My niece is teaching in the Seattle area. They have a lot of Ethiopians and they have and Eritreans, so there's that whole Muslim unit there. And so I know what you're saying is dealing with the diaspora around us we need to have these lenses and then create activities where the children and the families can come together. And a school is a great place to do that. It's a non-offensive place because you're helping the children. So and not even make it a religious event, just a time to come and celebrate life. That's what I love about Lebanon is all the meza, the feasting and all the food around the table, and even think about having have the families plan it and bring something from your tradition. Because whenever there's participation there, then that's valuing that person. So you have something to contribute. I'm not going to, I'm going to teach you how to make In-N-Out burgers. No. How do we celebrate food?
She's making us hungry.
You need to translate. In-N-Out burger is
Not Midwestern.
Chick-fil-A. Watch out, In-N-Out's coming. They're crazy about it there. Anyway, Chick-fil-A, often what we do is we want to press people into our mold out of the goodness of our hearts, not realizing that the mold doesn't work.
Yeah.
So then make it enjoyable to learn other people's traditions. That's why I'm an ethnomusicologist. I can move into their culture. And music is a misnomer because it's music, dance, drama, the flags, everything.
Would you please join me in thanking our panelists?
Yeah.